The first time my HOA tried to force open my private gate, they didn't send a letter, they sent 3 men, a tow truck, and a moving company. And they came onto my ranch at 74-2 on a Monday morning believing one thing, that I would step aside because they had an HOA logo on a piece of paper. They were wrong. By the time the sun disappeared behind the mesquite trees that evening, their moving trucks were still sitting outside my locked steel gate. My neighbors had stopped pretending they didn't see what was happening, and the HOA president had discovered something she clearly never expected to find, a county survey from 1998. And on that survey in black ink was a boundary line that could destroy everything she had been planning. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 46 years old, and I've lived on the same piece of Texas land for almost 11 years. It isn't some enormous ranch you'd see in a television show. It's 38 acres on the edge of a growing development outside a small Texas town. There are old oak trees scattered across the property, a red barn behind the house, a wooden fence running along the western pasture, and enough open land for my 14 head of cattle to wander without feeling crowded. The house sits about 200 yards from the county road. Between that road and my driveway is a private gravel lane. At the end of that lane stands a 6-foot steel gate. That gate has been there longer than the HOA, longer than the new subdivision. And according to every legal document I owned, longer than anyone currently arguing about it had even purchased their homes. I had painted the gate dark green myself. It wasn't beautiful. It didn't need to be. It was strong, heavy, and practical. Exactly the kind of thing you want when your property is surrounded by cattle equipment and people who increasingly believe empty land is just undeveloped real estate waiting for somebody to claim it. My property had been peaceful for years. Then the subdivision arrived. The developers built almost 200 houses on what used to be pasture land east of my ranch. At first I didn't care. People needed homes. Families needed somewhere to live. I even waved at the construction crews when they passed. But then the homeowners association started sending me letters. The first letter said my gate was visually inconsistent with community access standards. I laughed when I read it. The community didn't own my road. It didn't own my ranch. And I wasn't even part of their HOA. I threw the letter in a drawer. 2 weeks later, another one arrived. This one was more aggressive. It claimed the gravel lane leading to my property was designated as a shared access corridor. I called the number on the letter. A woman answered. "This is Daniel Mercer," I said. "Can you tell me what property you're talking about?" There was a pause. "Your access road, my private driveway. It's not exactly private." I looked through my kitchen window at the gate. According to who? According to the association's records. Then your association's records are wrong. She didn't like that answer. Nobody did. 3 days later I received a notice from the president herself. Her name was Patricia Whitmore. She was 58, perfectly groomed, always dressed like she was heading to a corporate meeting, and had the unusual ability to smile while delivering threats. I met her once at the county planning office. She shook my hand and said, "Mr. Mercer, we're simply trying to establish reasonable access." I said, "Access to what?" "The Western Service Road." There is no Western Service Road." Her smile disappeared. "There will be?" That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't a request, it was a warning. For the next month, I watched construction crews working near the eastern boundary of my property. Then one afternoon I noticed orange survey flags. They weren't inside my land. They were placed along the gravel lane leading to my gate. I walked outside. A man in a yellow vest was holding a surveying instrument. "Can I help you?" I asked. He lowered the equipment. "We're marking the proposed access road." "Proposed by who?" "The developer." "Did the developer ask me?" He looked uncomfortable. "No." "Did the county approve it?" Another pause. "Not that I'm aware of." I pulled out my phone. "Then you need to leave." He packed his equipment. Before he walked away, he said something that made my stomach tighten. "They're saying the road was never legally closed." I watched him disappear down the lane. That evening, I went through every document I had. Deed, title insurance, property survey, closing documents, tax records, everything. Then I found the document I'd almost forgotten about, a recorded easement map from 1998. I spread it across my dining room table. The map showed the county road, my property, the old ranch boundary, and the exact gravel lane leading to my gate. At the bottom was a notation. Private access, no public right established. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I took a picture. I knew I was going to need it. I just didn't know how soon. The answer came 4 days later. At 6:51 on Monday morning, I heard engines. Not one engine. Several. I walked outside wearing my faded blue work shirt, brown ranch boots, and the tan felt hat I'd worn for years. My old black Ford F-250 was parked beside the barn. The cattle were still in the eastern pasture. The morning air was cool. And coming down my gravel lane were 3 vehicles. 2 massive moving trucks, and a white pickup with the OA's logo on the door. I stopped walking. The first moving truck rolled toward my gate. I could see Patricia Whitmore sitting in the passenger seat of the pickup behind it. She wasn't there to discuss anything. She was there to make something happen. The truck stopped approximately 20 feet from my steel gate. Patricia climbed out. She held a folder against her chest. "Good morning, Daniel." I looked at the trucks, then at her. "What are those doing here?" She smiled. "We're exercising the association's access rights." "No, you're not." Her smile vanished. "The board has authorized temporary access through this corridor. This is my private property." She opened the folder. "We have documentation." "Then show me." She took 1 step toward the gate. "I don't think you understand the situation." "I understand it perfectly." She pointed behind me. "We have residents moving into the new homes on the west side. Their construction materials need access. I looked at the moving trucks. Those aren't construction trucks. Her jaw tightened. They're being used for association operations. I almost laughed. Association operations. She nodded. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. Open the gate. I didn't move. Patricia, you're standing on my property. She looked toward the 2 truck drivers, then back at me. Open it. No. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then one of the truck drivers started his engine again. I stepped closer to the gate. Don't. The truck rolled forward, slowly. The steel gate remained locked. And for the first time that morning, Patricia looked uncertain, because she had expected me to back down. She hadn't expected the gate to hold. The truck stopped inches away. I could hear the engine vibrating through the metal. Patricia raised her voice. Daniel, this is your final warning. I looked directly at her. No. She stared at me. Then she made a phone call. And that's when I realized this wasn't about access anymore. They had come prepared. And whoever Patricia was calling was someone she believed could make me open that gate. I just didn't know yet that the next person to arrive would change the entire fight. The phone call lasted less than a minute. Patricia Whitmore stood beside her white HOA pickup with one hand covering the microphone. Speaking in a low voice I couldn't hear, I couldn't make out the words, but I could read her face. She was angry. Not nervous, not embarrassed, angry. The kind of anger people show when they're used to getting their way and suddenly discover that someone hasn't received the memo. The truck driver kept his engine running. I walked back toward my house and pulled out my phone. I started recording. Patricia noticed immediately. Are you recording me? Yes. Why? Because you're on my property. She scoffed. This is ridiculous. No. What's ridiculous is bringing moving trucks onto someone's private property without permission. The second truck driver climbed out of his cab. He looked at the gate, then at Patricia. Mom, we're not supposed to drive onto private property without authorization. Patricia snapped her head toward him. You have authorization. From who? She didn't answer. The driver looked uncomfortable. I understood immediately. He hadn't been told the whole story. He'd been told there was a scheduled move and a temporary access road. That was all. The first truck driver finally shut off his engine. The silence that followed was almost peaceful. Almost. Then I heard tires on gravel. A black SUV appeared at the end of the lane. It moved quickly. Too quickly. The vehicle stopped behind Patricia's pickup. A man stepped out wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him. Martin Hale, the HOA's attorney. I'd seen his name on 3 letters. I'd never met him in person. He walked toward the gate without looking at me. Mr. Mercer, he said. Mr. Hale. He stopped a few feet away. I've been asked to resolve this matter. Good. He opened his briefcase. I suggest you unlock the gate. I looked at him. On what authority? He removed a document. The association has determined that the lane is subject to a historical access easement. Historical according to who? The association's title research, not the county. He paused. That's not relevant. It is if you're claiming an easement. Patricia stepped closer. Daniel, you're making this far more difficult than it needs to be. I laughed. You're the ones who brought 2 moving trucks to my gate. Martin looked annoyed. The trucks are here because several homeowners are scheduled to move today. That's unfortunate. His eyes narrowed. You can't interfere with lawful access. Then prove it's lawful. He held out the document. I didn't take it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and zoomed in on the picture I'd taken of the 1998 survey. This says private access. Martin glanced at the screen. His expression changed only slightly, but I saw it. He recognized the document. You have that? Where did you get it? My closing documents. He stared at the image for several seconds. Then he handed the paper back to Patricia. Where is the original? At my house? Mr. Mercer, I recommend you don't make any decisions based on incomplete information. I recommend you read the entire survey. He didn't answer. That was the first crack. Tiny, but real. Patricia stepped between us. We are not going to stand here arguing all morning. She turned toward the truck drivers. Move the trucks forward. The first driver looked at Martin. Martin didn't say anything. The driver looked at Patricia again. I don't want to damage anything. There's nothing to damage. I looked at him. The gate is locked. He sighed. Mom, just move forward. I stepped closer. Don't. The driver stopped. Patricia's face reddened. You are obstructing authorized access. I'm protecting my property. That's not your decision. That absolutely is. She pulled out her phone. Fine. She made another call. This time I knew who she was calling. The sheriff. I wasn't worried. I knew the sheriff's office couldn't simply declare an easement because an HOA president demanded one. But I also knew how situations like this could look. A wealthy-looking HOA president. A property owner standing behind a locked gate. 2 huge trucks waiting in the road. 1 angry argument. If a deputy arrived and only heard Patricia's version, things could get messy. So I kept recording. 10 minutes later, a county sheriff's SUV appeared. The deputy parked behind the moving trucks and walked toward us. He was tall, probably in his 40s, with a calm expression. His name badge read Deputy Cole Ramirez. He looked at Patricia. What's going on? She immediately stepped forward. This man is blocking a lawful access road. Ramirez looked at me. Sir, this is private property. They're attempting to enter without my permission. Patricia interrupted. The HOA has an established easement. Ramirez looked at Martin. Do you have documentation? Martin handed him the papers. The deputy read them. Then he looked at me. Do you have anything showing the property is private? I handed him my phone. He studied the photograph. Then I said, the original is inside my house. Can I see it? Of course. I walked back to the house. Patricia and Martin followed. I unlocked the front door and went straight to the dining room. The original survey was exactly where I'd left it. I carried it outside. Deputy Ramirez placed it on the hood of his SUV. He read every line. Then he looked at the HOA's document, then back at mine. Nobody spoke. Finally, he asked Martin a question. Where did this easement come from? Martin cleared his throat. It's referenced in several association planning documents. That's not what I asked. Martin looked irritated. It was part of the original development plan. Ramirez shook his head. Development plan isn't the same thing as recorded easement. Patricia stepped forward. Our legal counsel has reviewed this. The deputy looked at her. I'm sure he has. She frowned. Ramirez folded the survey. Until this gets clarified by the county or a court, I can't order this man to open his private gate. Patricia's face went completely still. But the residents need access. I understand. They have moving appointments. I understand that too. So what are you saying? Ramirez pointed toward the trucks. I'm saying they can't enter through here without permission. For the first time that morning, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. But it didn't last. Patricia stared at me. You realize what you're doing? Yes. You're disrupting the lives of dozens of families. No. Your board scheduled their moves through property it didn't own. Her eyes hardened. You will regret this. I looked at the locked gate. I don't think I will, though she turned around and walked back toward her pickup. Martin followed. But before he got into the SUV, he stopped beside me. His voice was quieter now. Mr. Mercer, you should hire an attorney. He looked surprised. Ooh, nobody yet. He gave me a thin smile. Then you should. He left. The moving truck stayed for almost 2 hours. Eventually, the drivers had no choice but to turn around. One truck managed to reverse carefully. The second had a much harder time. The lane wasn't wide enough for an easy turnaround. The driver had to back nearly a quarter mile toward the county road. Cars from the subdivision began lining up behind them. People were getting out, watching, recording, whispering, and then something unexpected happened. A woman from the new subdivision walked toward me. She was carrying a toddler on her hip. I don't know you, she said. I know. I'm supposed to move into my house today. I understand. She looked at the gate, then at the trucks. Did you really refuse to let them through? They don't have permission. She looked confused. The HOA told us this was a shared access road. I shook my head. It's not. She stared at me for several seconds. Then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. They told us we were buying homes with access through your ranch. I felt my stomach drop. Who told you that? The developer. Did you get that in writing? She nodded. It's in our closing packet. That changed everything. I asked her to wait. I went inside and grabbed a notebook. She showed me a copy of her documents. I read the paragraph. It didn't say the AO owned my road. It said residents had planned access to adjoining service corridors. Planned. Not recorded. Not granted. Planned. The distinction was enormous. But then I noticed something else. A map was attached. The map showed the proposed road. And the proposed road ran directly across my property. Not around it, through it, straight through the middle of my cattle pasture. I stared at the map. My mouth went dry. This isn't your road, I said. She looked at me. Then whose is it? Mine. She swallowed. Then why did they sell us houses with this? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But suddenly, the HOA's obsession with my gate made sense. The gate wasn't the problem. The gate was the last obstacle between them and something much bigger. A road. A development expansion. And possibly millions of dollars. That evening, I called a property attorney named Rebecca Lawson. She came to my ranch the next morning. Rebecca was 43, sharp, direct, and completely unimpressed by the HOA's paperwork. She spread the documents across my kitchen table. For nearly an hour, she said almost nothing. Then she pointed at the old survey. Daniel, this is important. I figured. No, you don't understand. She tapped the boundary line. This isn't just proof that the road is private. She moved her finger farther east. This may show that the developer built part of the subdivision using a boundary assumption that was never legally established. I stared at her. Meaning we may have a much bigger problem. She pulled out another document. It was a county plat. The date was from 4 years earlier. Rebecca compared it with the HOA's current map. Then she smiled, not because it was funny, because she'd found something. They moved the boundary. I leaned forward. What? The original county plat shows your property line here. She pointed. The HOA development map puts it here. The difference was nearly 40 feet. I stared at the two lines. 40 feet might not sound like much, but over several hundred yards it could mean thousands of square feet. And there was something sitting directly inside that disputed strip. A road, a drainage corridor, and several newly built homes. I looked at Rebecca. Are you telling me some of those houses may be on my land? She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I'm telling you we need a licensed surveyor before anyone says another word. So we hired one. His name was Thomas Reed. He had been surveying property in the county for more than 30 years. He arrived 2 days later in a white work truck loaded with equipment. He spent the entire morning walking the boundary. He checked old monuments, county records, coordinates, historical plats, everything. I watched him work from the fence line. At around 3:30 in the afternoon, he walked back toward me. He looked serious. What did you find? I asked. He removed his hat. I found the original boundary monument. My heart started pounding. Where? He pointed toward the western pasture, about 37 feet east of where the HOA's map says your boundary is. Rebecca looked at me. That's exactly what the old plat indicated. Thomas nodded. There's more. He opened his folder. The road they're calling an access corridor crosses your property. I stared at him. How much? Approximately 0.8 miles? Nobody spoke. Then Thomas added something that made everything suddenly much bigger. The HOA doesn't just have an access problem. He looked directly at me. They may have a title problem. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood outside beneath the porch light, looking toward the steel gate. For years, that gate had simply been a gate. Now it felt like a line drawn in the dirt between two versions of the truth. On one side was my ranch. On the other was an entire development built around an assumption. And somewhere inside the OA's records was the reason they were so desperate to get through my gate. The next morning, Rebecca called me at 7:06. Her voice was unusually serious. Daniel, don't open that gate for anyone. Why? I found something in the county records. What? A long pause. Then she said the HOA filed a document yesterday claiming they have a permanent right to your road. I looked toward the gate.
Can they do that? Another pause.
But they did something much worse! I gripped the phone. What? Rebecca lowered her voice. They attached a map to the filing. The map doesn't show your gate. I frowned. Why does that matter? Because according to their new filing, the gate doesn't exist. I looked outside. The steel gate stood exactly where it had stood for 11 years. Locked solid. Real. And suddenly I understood. They weren't trying to force open my gate because they thought they had the right to use my road. They were trying to make the county believe the gate, and possibly the private road behind it, had never legally existed at all. And if they succeeded, I wasn't just fighting an HOA. I was fighting to prove that part of my own property was mine. By 8 o'clock that morning, Rebecca Lawson was sitting across from me at my kitchen table with 3 folders spread between us. She had spent most of the night reviewing county records. I could tell from the look on her face that she hadn't found anything that made her happy. What exactly did they file? I asked. She slid a copy across the table. An application to establish a permanent access corridor. I read the first page, then the second. Then I stopped. They're claiming this road has been used by the public for more than 20 years. Rebecca nodded. But it hasn't. I know. So why would they say that? Because if they can establish a prescriptive right of access, they don't necessarily need your permission. I looked toward the window. The steel gate was visible between the oak trees. But there's a problem with their story. They haven't been using it for 20 years. I almost smiled. Exactly. Rebecca opened another folder. The subdivision wasn't even there 20 years ago. That was the first piece of good news we'd had, but it wasn't enough. We needed proof. Over the next week, Rebecca and I collected everything we could find. Old photographs, property tax records, historical aerial images, maintenance receipts, fence, repair invoices, even photographs from my original home inspection. The evidence kept piling up. The road had always been private. The gate had always existed, and nobody from the public had ever been given unrestricted access. Then we found something neither of us expected. A county maintenance log from 2004. The county had inspected the road after a severe storm. The report clearly identified it as the private ranch access, owner maintained. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. That's excellent. Is it enough? No. She tapped the paper. But it's another nail. HOA meanwhile wasn't waiting. Patricia Whitmore sent me another letter. This one threatened legal action if I continued interfering with community access. I didn't respond. Instead, Rebecca sent a formal notice demanding that the HOA cease entering or attempting to enter my property. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then the signs appeared. Bright orange signs were installed along the subdivision's side of the road. HORZ underneath was the HOA's name. I drove past them and shook my head. They were trying to make the road look official. And it worked. Some residents believed them. Others didn't. Then one evening someone knocked on my door. It was the same woman with the toddler from moving day. Her name was Emily Carter. She looked nervous. Can I talk to you?
Sure.
She handed me an envelope. I think you need this. Inside was a copy of an email sent by the developer to several homeowners. The email was dated almost a year earlier. One sentence stood out, team. The final phase of the community will require completion of the Western Access Corridor. I read it twice. Final phase. Emily nodded. They're planning another section. That's what I heard. Where? She pointed toward my western pasture. My stomach tightened. How many houses? About 70 homes, a road through my ranch. And suddenly the HOA's behavior made perfect sense. This wasn't about moving trucks. It wasn't even about today's residents. They wanted access because they needed the road to expand the development. My private property was standing between them and their final phase. The next morning, Rebecca met me at the county courthouse. We requested the original subdivision documents. For hours, we went through old files. Then, just before lunch, the clerk brought us a box. Inside was a document from 2001, the developer's original development agreement. Rebecca read it, then read it again. Her expression changed. What? I asked. She pointed to a paragraph. The developer had acknowledged that the western corridor depended on obtaining a separate easement from the adjoining landowner. Me except there was no signed easement. None. The developer knew they didn't own the road. They had known it from the beginning. Rebecca looked at me. They built the community assuming you'd eventually sell. I felt something cold move through my chest. So the OA knew. Maybe the current board didn't. But someone knew. She nodded. And someone made a lot of money hoping you wouldn't fight. That afternoon we sent copies of the document to the county planning department. The response came the next day. They wanted a meeting. 3 days later, I sat inside a county conference room with Rebecca, Thomas Reed, 2 county officials, Patricia Whitmore, Martin Hale, and 2 representatives from the development company. For the first 20 minutes, everyone spoke politely. Then the county survey coordinator put the original plat on the screen. The current show map doesn't match the recorded boundary. Patricia immediately responded. Me believe the discrepancy is due to historical mapping errors. Thomas shook his head. It isn't. Part everyone looked at him. He pointed toward the original survey markers. The monument locations match the 1998 survey. Then he looked at Patricia. The AOA's map is the outlier. Silence. Martin Hale leaned forward. Our client believes there was an implied access agreement. Thomas shook his head again. Implied agreements don't move survey monuments. One of the county officials asked, does the HOA have a recorded easement? Martin hesitated. Does the developer? No. Does the county? No. The official looked at Patricia. Then on what basis are you requesting access? Patricia looked at me. For the benefit of the community. The county official didn't blink. That's not a legal basis. For the first time, Patricia had no answer. But then the developer's representative spoke. We have homeowners who were sold properties based on planned access. Rebecca responded immediately. That is a dispute between the developer and those homeowners. She looked across the table. My client did not sign those contracts. Nobody argued. Because they couldn't. The meeting ended without a final decision, but the county issued a temporary notice preventing the HOA from entering my property until the boundary and access issue were resolved. I thought that would calm things down. It didn't. 2 nights later, at approximately 11:40 p.m., my security camera detected movement near the gate. I opened the monitor. 3 figures were standing beside the steel gate. One was holding a flashlight. Another was photographing the lock. I grabbed my jacket and walked outside. My cattle were restless. The figures saw me. They turned. Who's there? No answer. I switched on the floodlights. The entire gate area lit up. One man raised his hands. Relax. What are you doing here? We were told to inspect the access. Whose silence? I called the sheriff. They left before deputies arrived. But they left something behind. A measuring tape and a set of blueprints. I picked them up. They showed the proposed western expansion. 73 lots, a new entrance, a drainage system, and a road running directly across my pasture. At the bottom was a projected development value, $18.6 million. I stared at the number. That was what my gate was standing between. Not a road. $18.6 million. The next morning, Rebecca filed for a temporary restraining order. The HOA responded by accusing me of weaponizing private property. That phrase appeared in newspapers, then on local social media. Suddenly, people who had never met me were calling me selfish. Some said I was holding an entire neighborhood hostage. Others said I should sell the land. One comment said if one man can stop an entire community, something is wrong with the law. I almost believed them. Then Emily came to my house again. She brought 12 other homeowners. They had discovered the same thing we had. Their contracts promised future access that didn't legally exist. They weren't angry with me anymore. They were angry with the people who had sold them homes based on that promise. The homeowners formed their own group. And suddenly, Patricia Whitmore wasn't facing one angry ranch owner. She was facing dozens of homeowners asking where their money had gone. The legal battle accelerated. A judge scheduled an emergency hearing. The courtroom was packed. I sat beside Rebecca. Across the room sat Patricia, Martin, and representatives from the developer. The judge reviewed the documents quietly. Then he asked the HOA's attorney one question. Show me the recorded easement. Martin stood. Your Honor, there is a long-standing understanding. That wasn't my question. Martin stopped. The courtroom became silent. Show me the recorded easement. Martin looked through his papers. We don't have a recorded easement. The judge looked over his glasses. Then why are you attempting to exercise access rights over this man's property? Martin tried to explain. But the judge interrupted again. An expectation isn't an easement. Those 4 words changed everything. The judge issued a temporary injunction. The OA was prohibited from entering my property. The proposed western corridor was frozen, and the developer was provide the complete documentation used to market the expansion. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Because the documents revealed one final secret. A private email chain. In one email, a developer executive wrote Mercer probably won't fight if enough pressure is applied. Another said get the HOA involved. They can make it look like a community access issue instead of a development issue. And then came the sentence that destroyed their entire argument. The gate is the only thing stopping the western phase. Rebecca read the email 3 times. Then she looked at me. They knew. I nodded. They knew all along. The final hearing took place 6 weeks later. By then, the county had completed its own investigation. The surveyor confirmed my original boundary. The county confirmed there was no public easement. The historical records confirmed the road had always been privately maintained. And the developer's emails showed that the HOA had been used to pressure me into surrendering access. Patricia sat quietly through most of the hearing. When the judge finally addressed her, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. He said the association had no authority to enter my property and had misrepresented its access rights to residents. The judge also ordered the developer to resolve the access issue with affected homeowners without involving my property. Then he turned to the OA. You cannot manufacture a property right by repeatedly claiming that one exists. That sentence was quoted everywhere. The OA eventually removed the signs. The moving company sent me a written apology. The developer abandoned the western expansion. And the homeowners filed their own legal claims against the developer. Patricia Whitmore resigned from the OA board 3 months later. Martin Hale was no longer representing the association by the following year. As for my ranch, nothing changed. The red barn remained. The cattle still wandered through the pasture. The old wooden fence still creaked whenever the wind picked up, and the steel gate stayed exactly where it had always been, locked. But I did something unexpected. I opened the gate for Emily, not for the OA, not for the developer, for her. She stood there with her little boy beside her. "Why?" she asked. I smiled. "Because you're not asking to take something from me?" She looked at the gate. "What happens now?" "No, you drive around." She laughed. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh since the whole mess started. The alternate route was longer, but the county eventually improved it. The residents got their access. The developer lost its shortcut, and I kept my land. A year later, I replaced the old lock on the steel gate. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to remember. I kept the original lock on a shelf in my barn. Beside it, I framed the first photograph I'd taken that morning when those moving trucks arrived. 2 enormous trucks, a white HOA pickup, and my steel gate standing between them and everything they thought they were entitled to. People sometimes ask me why I fought so hard. The answer is simple. It wasn't about a gate. It wasn't even about the road. It was about the moment someone decided that because enough people wanted something, they could simply redraw the line around what belonged to someone else. I learned something during those months. Property lines aren't just lines on paper. Sometimes they're promises. Promises that your home is yours, your land is yours, and your no still means something, even when the person standing across from you has lawyers, money, influence, and a whole neighborhood behind them. That steel gate never stopped a community from moving forward. It only stopped them from moving through me. And every time I close it at sunset, I remember the morning those trucks arrived believing they had the right to pass. They didn't. They never did. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't open the door. It's stand behind it, hold the lock, and let the truth knock.